Before I get into this video, I just want to say that this video will have triggering subjects, and I'd recommend not watching this video if you don't want to watch a very heavy video. I also want to say, please do not harass anyone mentioned in this video because I don't think it helps anything, and honestly, I think it would honestly make the situation a lot worse. This video is for informational purposes only, and I hope it serves as a more digestible way for you to understand the current situation going on. And if this video helps you to understand the situation better, then I'm happy. With all of that out of the way, let's get into the video itself. Hi everyone, I'm Shiesta, and in today's video we're going to be talking about the current allegations and documents surrounding HornsOnHalos. But before I get into any of that, I want to quickly introduce HornsOnHalos for any of those who do not know who this artist is. So HornsOnHalos is an artist that has made a lot of comics detailing on different subjects such as relationship issues, mental health, and self-improvement. He also seems to talk about body positivity and misogyny quite a lot, especially talking about how he doesn't like those who over-sexualize women and treat them like sexual objects, which I'm going to be getting into a bit later when it's a bit more relevant. I also want to note that Lance is currently 26 years old and was born on the 1st of November 1999, and I'll be mentioning his age where relevant. With his introduction out of the way, I'll be getting into the allegations. For this section, I'll be talking about Lance's history of interacting inappropriately with people who are simply too much younger than him. I'll be trying to keep this in chronological order so it makes more sense, as this has happened on multiple instances. The first instance I'll be talking about is something that happened in 2017 when Lance would have been 18 and the victim would have been 14. Right off the bat, it does seem like Lance knows this person's age because there's a screenshot of Lance talking about how this person's art is so amazing for their age without explicitly stating that this person is 14, but one can only assume that Lance knows this person's age due to Lance phrasing this message in a way where it's like, oh, you're so much younger than me and you're good at art. It just seems like he knows this person's age. So establishing that Lance knows this person's age, it's extremely bizarre how he is talking about how he is smiling and wanting to give compliments when hearing a 14-year-old's voice whilst being 18 at the time. I mean, it's just morally reprehensible, and I mean, it's just completely gross. There is also an instance of Lance offering to draw him and the 14-year-old in romantic scenarios, which is very obviously not okay. Allegedly, Lance also would self-deprecate himself on voice calls with this 14-year-old and essentially fish for compliments, but there isn't really proof of this, only proof that this person had been in a voice call with Lance at some point. Lance also did make a response to this allegation on his Instagram story, and in this response he simply just says that this person is lying, but also in the same story says that this person had plenty of time to block him or confront him if they were uncomfortable, which directly confirms that this stuff did happen. I'll play the clip that I'm talking about now.
This is how I knew you were just lying out your dumbass jaw, because you went from saying that when you first met me on Google Plus, and this is taking it way the fuck back, because 2017 I was 17 turning 18, and you telling me that I was in your comment section fucking flirting with you and talking about your body, yet there was still ample time for you to block me or approach me and confront me and just tell me to stop.
One of the biggest issues I have with this response is that Lance immediately places the blame onto the person who is 4 years younger than him. When you are 18 years old, it should never cross your mind that it's okay to romantically approach a 14-year-old, because very simply, it is not. And it's not their responsibility to tell you to stop, because they don't have the capacity to realize that this isn't okay. You have the capacity to realize that this isn't okay. What's even worse is that Lance is in his mid-20s and he's still trying to justify why he romantically approached someone who was so much younger than him. It really shows a lack of growth, which is kind of ironic because his whole page is about self-growth. But I digress. The next instance I'm going to be talking about is one that took place in 2018. At this time, Lance would have been 18 and the victim was 12. However, the victim did allegedly lie about their age and claim to be 14. However, 14 and 18 is still not justifiable, and even if Lance thought this person was 14, it doesn't really matter because that's still not an okay age gap to have. Lance is undeniably aware of this person being allegedly 14 and directly mentions them being 14, saying, quote, "You're only 14 now, yeah?" Which, with the way this is phrased, it already shows some self-awareness with the age gap. However, instead of acknowledging the age gap and deciding not to pursue a 14-year-old, he finds this attractive, calling them such a young little baby. Message after that, the minor says that they're barely going to be in 7th grade, which directly reveals that this person is actually 12. And Lance simply just responds with, "I'll be in college," just completely ignoring the fact that he's talking to someone in 7th grade whilst being a high school graduate. And it's not even like he's just talking to a 7th grader. No, he's directly flirting with this 7th grader and saying that they look kissable and cuddly as fuck. He's saying, "I love you" to this 7th grader and calling them sweetie. He's calling this 7th grader a snow bunny. He's sending pictures of himself shirtless with a towel around his neck to a 7th grader. He's sending images like this to a 7th grader. There's simply nothing to defend here, and I genuinely have nothing else to say other than this is disgusting. I also want to note that the victim claims that nudes were sent between him and the victim, and if this is the case, this is obviously extremely illegal. However, there is no proof for this. We can only really speculate, but given that Lance stayed in contact with this 7th grader up until 2020, paired with his obsession with gaining nudes from women, I personally believe that it's pretty believable that he at one point would have asked for nudes from this person, given that they were already being extremely romantic in the screenshots being shown, which is honestly a really disturbing reality to think about, and I hope that the victim is okay. Moving on, the next thing I'm going to be talking about is a lot shorter, and I'm only going to be mentioning one quick screenshot. But at the start of 2019, Lance sent unsolicited nudes to a 17-year-old whilst being 19. And the main issue that I have is that the 17-year-old very clearly said that they do not want nudes sent to them, and he did it anyways and then deleted it after, which in a way is sexual harassment because this person very clearly did not want to see his genitals, but I guess in Lance's eyes it doesn't matter because if he wants something, he's going to do it anyways. And it's kind of a pattern I've noticed whilst researching on this. Lance will want something that is very clearly not something that he should do, and he'll do it anyways, and then he'll apologize and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so bad." Lance also allegedly had an account where he would just post random images of porn when he was 19, which honestly is just abnormal behavior. I don't know why you would just post random pictures of IRL actual porn. And honestly, even up to recent years, it seems like his interest in porn has led to him treating women as not exactly human. But that's a section I'll get into later on. Another quick instance I want to mention is that HornsOnHalos asked for lewd pictures of someone from when they were 16, and he was more worried about his reputation rather than the fact that he was asking for nudes of a 16-year-old. And allegedly, this person was 17 when Lance was asking for old photos of them, and Lance would have been 24 at the time. The 17-year-old also has images that Lance had sent to them, which kind of backs up the validity of the claim. But do you know what backs up the validity of the claim more? Lance admitting to the allegation. Now, Lance does this in a very vague way where he doesn't exactly say what he did, and even for me, I'm struggling to even see this as an apology for what he did, just because there's absolutely zero context at all to this. But allegedly, this is an apology for asking a 17-year-old for nudes while being 24, which is absolutely repulsive, but unfortunately, it's not surprising. For this section, we'll be going over Lance's history of abusive behavior towards women, as well as general misogyny. I think it's important to note that on multiple occasions, HornsOnHalos has made posts talking about the topic of misogyny, as well as just the objectification of women in general. However, despite all of these comics, it seems that in private, he completely goes against everything he praises in public. And so for this section, I'll be going over the multiple instances where HornsOnHalos has mistreated women. For one of the first instances that I'm going to be talking about, I'll need to give some extra context. So HornsOnHalos has an account where he posts not safe for work, and at some point in 2023, HornsOnHalo made a story asking for models aged 20 plus to send not safe for work references of their bodies to him for him to use for his art, which alone, coming from a perspective of someone who has modeled before, I don't really think is weird. But unfortunately, HornsOnHalos managed to find a way to make this weird. In this screenshot, HornsOnHalos can be seen pressuring someone to send him nudes, despite the person clearly saying that they're suffering from period cramps. When the person said they're on their period, all HornsOnHalos said was, "Tits out now." I mean, it's just kind of shocking how little care someone can have for other people. I mean, it's just kind of crazy how this is the same guy talking about the fetishization of women and how it's bad, but at the same time, he's pressuring women into sending him nudes. But unfortunately, this is just one of many times where HornsOnHalos has done this. Another instance would be where HornsOnHalos is telling a 19-year-old to quickly send them selfies, which I can only really assume is sexual selfies just because of the nature of the text and how desperate Lance is acting in these texts. And when the person doesn't send the photos, Lance kind of makes fun of them by telling them to call themselves Tony the Tiger because they're always flaking out, which, I mean, it's just really bizarre. The next instance I want to talk about is honestly a bit more incriminating, and this person is also anonymous. This instance happened in 2024 when the victim was 19 and HornsOnHalos would have been 24. Starting off strong, we have a screenshot of Lance talking about how this 19-year-old has matured well. That being paired with him calling this person a good little girl is really concerning. And then when you pair it with his history of being sexual or romantic with people who are underage or significantly younger than him, it really starts to paint a bad picture. And even if you're someone who thinks that it's okay to have a kink where you're calling someone a good little girl and talking about how well they've matured, I don't think it's okay to bring up the fact that you can blackmail this person for sending nudes mid-sexual interaction. There's also allegedly instances of him claiming that he will hurt this person if they mess up, which, I mean, okay then. I really don't understand the appeal of wanting to hurt someone that you love. I also want to quickly make a disclaimer and say that obviously these screenshots are very weirdly cropped, and because it's through iMessages, the validity of these screenshots can be questioned. The only evidence they have of this person being actually in contact with HornsOnHalos is this one screenshot here, where the contact photo of the person that is allegedly Lance is a photo that I haven't seen anywhere posted publicly by Lance. Another thing that does back up this being Lance is that the typing styles and kinks are very similar to what other people with confirmed screenshots have posted. However, because it's not 100% confirmed, it's best to take these screenshots with a grain of salt. The next instance we'll be moving on to is another instance of Lance pressuring someone into sending explicit photos. This instance happened in 2025. The victim was 20 and Lance would have been 25. Please note that I'm only mentioning ages for context's sake, not trying to imply anything else. Anyways, getting into this allegation, and for the first screenshot I'm going to show, it's just Lance responding to what I assume is a selfie of the person and saying, "More cleavage please, I want a nut tonight." And the victim responds with what I assume is a more suggestive photo. And Lance immediately asks this person to send it in the save in chat option, which in my opinion is immediately an overstep in boundaries, especially if you're not actually in a relationship with this person or know them very well. In my opinion, you're kind of demanding a lot of trust from someone that you don't really know, and I just think it's wrong. The person, after Lance requests this, immediately makes it clear that they're not comfortable with of this. There's another screenshot of him asking her to save an image in chat, but it's not really clear if this happened after she said she was uncomfortable or if it was before, because the screenshot's kind of weirdly cropped. Here's a screenshot of Lance being extremely demanding and asking them to take more photos of him. And honestly, I've never seen someone so disinterested in someone making sexual advances towards them. I honestly don't know how HornsOnHalos kept going at it when this person clearly does not have any interest in him, at least not for this conversation shown. I mean, calling a woman a dumb slave and saying, is it genuinely an issue for a woman like you, whilst you're being extremely rude to her? And I know I've already said it, but really these comments just reek of misogyny and entitlement. And when the woman responds with, what's that supposed to mean? He gets even more degrading and says, you can't even answer the question. I mean, this is the same guy who talks about how misogyny is bad and how creepy men are evil. You are one of those creepy men. The call is coming from inside the house. Moving back onto the conversation, the woman responds with, I'm not talking to you tonight. And Lance responds with, so barking and woofs, which I'm pretty sure is a reference to his kink with pep play, but why would you bring that up mid-argument? The woman is clearly upset and says that she doesn't like being degraded all the time and it makes her mad. And Lance says something about being fixed by her, and the woman responds with, it's not up to me to fix you. Now, I want you to try and guess what Lance responded with. Okay, I'm gonna give you a moment to just think what he may have responded with. Okay, have you guessed? If you guessed anything along the lines of, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that, or any sort of apology, you couldn't be more wrong. However, if you guessed, then stop talking and show off your titties, then you guessed correctly. I genuinely do not know what could have possessed this man to respond with that mid-argument. To top it all off, Lance also manages to call her a dog in the same message, which, if you didn't know, the history of calling a woman a dog is to reinforce the idea that women are inferior to men. It's also used to attack women who are more assertive, and in this context it definitely applies. So essentially in this argument, Lance is just reducing this woman to a bad, misbehaved dog, rather than a human that is trying to communicate with him very clearly. The woman tells him to apologize, and Lance's response is to just call her a bitch. He says he doesn't apologize because he's not a bitch, and that she's the bitch in the dynamic, which is kind of crazy. There are so many layers of misogyny to his text that is honestly just insane that he could ever even attempt to try and pass as one of the good guys who understand misogyny and are feminists. This guy is a walking definition of a performative male, and also a definition of someone who can't keep their hand off that dick, because there is an argument going on and you're asking this person to show you their tillies. I don't know how throughout this conversation Lance continuously tries to light up a spark that is already dead. Like, no, she doesn't want your gratification and praise after you've called her a bitch. In other conversations that this person has had with Lance has acted very guilt-trippy and pressuring when she can't send nudes to him. For example, here he's saying, sigh, can you say it instead then? And she's clearly very uncomfortable with him being guilt-trippy because she says for him to not say sigh. And he just continues being sexual with her, despite her seemingly being very shut down after that. And there's another instance of her saying that she physically cannot do something sexual for him, and he just completely ignores that and tells her to do it again. I mean, at this point, it's really just unsurprising. The last thing to end this section is a screenshot of Lance telling this same woman to go on a diet and being extremely snarky during the messages, saying stuff like, sounds like a no. I mean, at this point, this guy might as well buy a matcha latte and start reading feminist literature because he clearly cares about women so much. The next section we'll be moving on to is the section about his responses and how he's handled criticism. I'll also probably be briefly mentioning some of his comics because they're directly related to what I'll be talking about. So let's move on to that section. For this section, I'll be going into Lance's responses to many allegations against him. The first set of apologies I'll be talking about is the ammo cat situation. Now, I haven't really gone into the details of the ammo cat situation, but to sum it up, HornsOnHalos admits to being very abusive towards someone called Ammo Cat, and then makes 2 other apologies that are extremely bad and self-serving. And so let's get into these because I feel like it really shows his sort of mindset. So the first apology is okay. I mean, he just pretty much admits to everything that he's accused of and then says that he doesn't expect to be forgiven at all, which is good. His next apology isn't even an apology, it's just a comic about the situation, and he's saying stuff like, I don't know why she brought it to the internet, and why didn't she just talk it out with me? She had my number. Well, I can answer those questions for you. If you abuse someone, they're probably going to feel unsafe and uncomfortable confronting you directly about stuff, especially if they've already attempted to do that in the past and you've had a history of reacting badly. I mean, the way that you've gone back on your apology by making this comic already shows that her fears are confirmed. You wouldn't learn anything even if she did try and explain to you what you did wrong. The only reason why you didn't want her to post publicly about you is because of your reputation, not because you actually wanted to solve things. And you can't really solve abuse either. If you decide that you're going to be selfish and abuse people, then you should also accept the consequences that come with that. This comic is entirely self-serving and just guilt-trippy, and it's very clear that you don't understand the weight of your actions when you're saying at the end of your comic that I guess it was too much to ask for her to be quiet about what you did to her. But don't worry, his third response is even worse, and I don't know how it gets worse, but it does. In his third response to Ammo Cat, he basically brings up Ammo Cat's past trauma with other men and says, well, you know I'm not as bad as them, right? No, you cannot just point out someone else's bad behaviors and say, well, they were more controlling and abusive than I was, so clearly I wasn't bad. Also, airing out someone's trauma just to try and get a chance to defend yourself is completely insane behavior. But do you want to know what else is insane behavior? Threatening to punch people in the face because they're outing you for things that you have done and admitted to doing.
Like, Sniz, I want to just punch you in the mouth, bruh.
If you're responding to allegations of abuse like this, then you cannot be surprised why no one would want to approach you, because you've chosen to make yourself completely unapproachable. Lance also tried to accuse the dog maker of having secrets, and Lance did this in the form of a comic. Now, the thing is that it doesn't even matter if the dog maker has done something bad, because it doesn't take away from the bad that you have done, and that's something that Lance can't seem to get into his head. Yes, there's always going to be someone that is worse than you, but that doesn't mean you're any better of a person or that we should just forget what you've done. And honestly, I've seen so many abusers use the tactic of deflection, and honestly, even if it works for you in the short term, it will always come back and bite you. So instead of desperately pointing at other people, maybe focus on your own issues instead, and then you'll have some actual self-improvement. The next comics I'm going to be talking about are ones where HornsOnHalos basically admits to everything that he's done, but also I think it's important to note that he has gone back on these moments of self-awareness and completely gone back to trying to justify his behavior. So let's get into it. So for the first comic where he admits to becoming more of an abusive person, he is talking about how he feels like he's becoming more like his abusive parents. Instead of reflecting on this and seeing how he can improve himself, he makes this guilt-trippy comic which kind of doesn't really do anything to hint at any sort of self-awareness other than, oh, I'm like my parents, I suck so much. Somehow he manages to feel bad for himself that he's an abuser rather than feeling bad for the victims that he's hurt. The next comic, right off the bat, he admits that he's a womanizer. Now, the next slides of the comic, he's talking about how his childhood dog passing caused him to have a puppy play kink, and that because his dog passed when he was really young, he is into people acting like dogs. There are implications to that. I am sitting here in shock. Now, I'm not going to say Lance is a zoophile or anything like that, because I pray that this was just poorly worded, but oh my god. If you're thinking about your dead dog while being sexual with women and you're enjoying it, you've got a problem. The next comic I'll be showing is a comic where HornsOnHalos essentially admits to being possessive, aggressive, and a bunch of other things. I mean, if he's so aware that he is all of these things, surely he'll be able to see why so many people do not like him. Admitting that you get so scary to your victims that they're afraid to talk to you, and then getting mad at them for seeking out closure in other ways is completely irrational. You also admit that all the comics you make venting about the bad things you've done are completely self-serving, and so maybe instead of encouraging unhealthy thinking patterns in your head, you should stop making comics and practice genuine self-reflection and accountability. The next section that I'll be moving on to is a little less serious, but I still feel like it's relevant to bring up, so let's get into it. So, whilst HornsOnHalos hasn't directly, outrightly said, "Oh, I hate gay people," he has pushed homophobic rhetorics. And whilst I understand if you're straight or not a part of the LGBTQ community, maybe it's hard to understand what these rhetorics are if they're not directly in your face. So, allow me to explain what's wrong with HornsOnHalos comics. For this first comic, HornsOnHalos presents the blue character who wants to headcanon a ship as gay as a creep, and makes the pink character look very submissive and scared. And the pink character is saying, "What? But they're not even being intimate." And the issue with this, other than the fact that the LGBTQ character is being presented as a creep, is being LGBTQ is not necessarily a sexual thing, and homophobes often use the idea of LGBTQ being inherently sexual to say stuff like, "Oh, keep it away from our children, keep it out of mainstream media because it's sexual," when it's not. Later on in the comic, LGBTQ ships are then compared to shipping minors and siblings together, which you can't compare being gay to incest and pedophilia because 1, they have no correlation, and 2, incest and pedophilia can exist in straight people too. Lance also did remake this post, and instead of having the comparison between LGBTQ and pedophilia and incest, at the end of the comic, Lance basically just says that the reason why people turn homophobic is because it's shoved in their face. I mean, that's extremely blatantly homophobic. Gay people are just the same as you, but they like someone of the same gender. It really isn't that serious. Someone will be a pedophile because they're a pedophile, not because they're gay or straight. I think that's everything I wanted to say on Lance's comics, and now we're going to move on to the conclusion of the video. I personally do not think Lance should be forgiven for his series of abusive behaviors and complete lack of consistent accountability. I think that he does more harm than good being online, especially when a lot of the women that he has been abusive to have met him through his platform. And also his history in general is just pretty unforgivable. I truly do not believe someone who treats women like they're objects and someone who has talked to many people who are underage should ever have a platform. And I'm sure pretty much all of us can agree on that. Before I end this video, I want to say thank you to my KOFI members. I really appreciate the support you guys give me, and it really motivates me more. I'm sorry I haven't been so active because I'm working a lot, but I hope I can bring more content soon. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching. Bye!